Hello, Trailblazers. Welcome to the Trailblazers Palette Podcast. I'm your host, Sancha Marshall, and today I'm excited to welcome the incredible artist Gwenn Seemel to the show. Gwenn is a groundbreaking artist who has carved out a remarkable niche for herself. She is fearlessly challenging societal norms and redefining artistic expression with her art. From her beginnings in France and Portland, Oregon, to her current studio in Lambertville, New Jersey, Gwenn has been making waves in the art world since 2003. Her work is bold and thought-provoking, using a unique polka-dot cubist style to explore issues of identity, connection, and mental health. Gwenn has dedicated herself to pushing artistic boundaries and creating meaningful connections with her audience through powerful projects like Everything's Fine. Today we'll explore the layers behind her creations, her innovative approach to sharing and creating art, and the journey that has led her to live a life outside the traditional boundaries set by society, all while navigating the complexities of a digital world without social media. Gwenn, a warm welcome to the Trailblazers Palette Podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I just wanted to start out by, we'll jump straight into you and your art style and sort of where that is today. So for people who don't know you and what you do.
Sure. So my art style has been described as a polka-dot cubism kind of a style. There's a lot of distinct brushstrokes and a lot of color. It originated in, a couple of places, really. I was pretty young, maybe 14, when my parents signed me up for an intaglio printmaking class, which is a medium where you have to make one of the ways to sort of create a gray area is to make lots of little marks, like cross-hatching. And so when then I started painting, or even as I kept on drawing after taking that class, I sort of got into this habit of making lots of little marks. And that is how the polka dot cubism became what it is. And so I'm now 42 and I'm still at it. So from 14 to 42, haven't quit.
That's awesome. And do you, you have a very distinct style. So I imagine most people could look at your paintings and know they're yours. And talking about how it's evolved, do you have preferred mediums or things that you like to use in your art?
Yeah, so I definitely, I like to say that I was raised by acrylic paints. I don't know how to paint with oils. I love acrylic paints. I love that they dry so fast. That's really important to the evolution of my style, and I feel like it vibes well with who I am. I like to add layers quickly. So acrylic paints are really my main mode of communication. I also draw acrylic paints. Those are my parents artistically, in a sense.
Yes. And I guess since growing up, since you said you were 14 and you've evolved with that, it's sort of probably become your main mode of expression with the acrylics.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So when you talk about, on your website, you've got boldly painted, joyfully feminist, and you sort of describe your work as playful and intense. And I love those two things together, and it definitely comes through in all of your work. If you can just talk a little bit about that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to find the right words to describe a visual thing, right? Yes. I remember one of the first shows that I went to at a commercial gallery after finishing school, and the artist, I loved the work. I think it was all self-portraits, and it was of the artist as a Superman, I want to say all of them. In any case, I think it was all self-portraits for sure. And the artist wrote 3 artist statements. The first was something about self-portraiture and was sort of self-effacing. And then the second one was like, why do I even have to do this? And the third one was full of expletives, and it was like, screw it, I don't want to do this, And it was sort of this meta commentary on, putting words to paintings.
Yes.
For visual things. And I think I started out with that sort of attitude, and then I slowly realized that it's helpful to talk about things that we like. And as artists, when we can speak well about our work or find good words for it, we help others to talk about our work as well. And through talking about it, fall in love with it too, hopefully, or at least understand it better. So I think it's a valuable thing as an artist to do whatever you can to figure out how to talk about your work.
I think that's such a lovely way of looking at it, actually, and I hadn't thought of it that way, because I've had that love-hate relationship too with the marketing of storytelling your art, but yes, it does. It helps others to, like you say, talk about it too, and to maybe even understand the artist's perspective, or or however you want to put that.
For sure. And whether they're agreeing or disagreeing with what you're saying, I think starting on some words helps them
Yes.
to have words as well, to have feelings as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that I I first came across your work, Gwen, when I did Corey Huff's course,
Hmm.
and I think I watched your video on the uncopyright,
Oh, yeah.
and you changed my perspective on that as an artist, and thank you for that, because I think that it is such an area where artists can feel, how would you say it, like kind of ripped off if somebody takes their
Yeah.
work, or and it gave me a lot of anxiety actually before I came across your stuff, and I really loved that. What you said was so true about putting your art out there, and we all kind of collect and interpret and reshare stuff all the time, in music and poetry and art, that it's so yeah, if
Yeah.
you can maybe just sort of describe the uncopyright from your perspective.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also makes me think of what we were just talking about in terms of language. I think there's a lot of language around feeling ripped off, around feeling that those more fearful feelings around putting your art out there, those more closed off feelings of putting your art out there. And there's maybe more now, but especially like 10 years ago, there wasn't as much conversation around like what is the language we use to around sharing that feels good for artists and that feels safe.
Yes.
And especially if listeners are new to the concept, I would recommend searching for the Creative Commons Kiwi video. It's an explainer video that dissects Creative Commons, which is a version of copyright. It's based on copyright that
Mm.
separates out copyright into its various pieces, because copyright actually has multiple rights in it. And
Yeah.
it helps you decide, what do you care about within copyright? Maybe it's all of it, and that's fine. But it helps you really think through all of the different rights. Like, maybe you don't care if other artists copy what you do. You just don't want someone taking your work and selling, versions of it, or making
Mm.
prints of it and selling it. You can
Mm.
separate those out using Creative Commons. So Creative Commons Kiwi video probably will get you to the video that will help you start to, think about this stuff.
Yeah. And probably an easy way to look at it too is probably like looking at social media there. If you think of what songs get taken down, or you can't monetize on YouTube or something like that, that there's some that
Mhm.
can be freely used, and some that require credit, and others that may require you to pay a fee to use, or something like that. It would be similar with art.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Creative Commons or the notions around it have become more accepted in the last few years, because there are official ways to check that off as a musician or as a video maker, where you can say, no, this is, I don't know on which platforms what you can say, but there are ways
Mm.
now to not just claim the full copyright. It's true.
Yes. And I think looking at that with art, and like you said, the common fears around sharing our art can be, really real when we look at the copyright stuff.
It's totally understandable I mean, this is a piece of your heart that you've ripped out of yourself and put out into the world. Of course you want to protect it and feel good about how it's being enjoyed in the world. It makes total sense, and I
Mm.
would never try to take that away from anybody. But for me, and for how I feel about the pieces of my heart that I've put out into the world,
Mm, mm.
um, I do get scared of how they're going to be used, for sure, still. But I
Yeah.
also know that if I spend too much time worrying about the stuff that I've already made and already shared, I just don't have any bandwidth for making new stuff. And so for me,
Yeah.
and for the way my brain works, it makes more sense to be like, no, I'm going to let it all go and trust, and then be annoyed when it's used wrong, but also just trust in the sense that when my stuff is used in a way that I think would be wrong, it's not wrong in the sense that I've put it in the public domain so people can do what they want. But if I feel wrong about it, maybe I talk to the person. I send them an email and I'm like, hey, what's going on here? Which I have done over the years,
Mm.
where I felt like, for example, there was this group that was trying to like do artists for hire. Like, you could hire an artist to draw something in particular, and they used one of my videos, which of course they were welcome to do, of me drawing, because it was public domain. But I said, hey, when you use my video, it makes it seem like I'm in your stable of artists, and I'm not. So like, you can use that, but it's sort of, not totally on the up and up. And they took it down. They were like, you're right. Like, that makes sense. Sure, we'll take it down. So,
Yeah.
a lot of times conversation can really solve things too. Yeah.
Yes, it's true, isn't it? Because and I know, when I've asked or things like that, sometimes I've been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. People are surprisingly okay sometimes.
Yes. Yes, not all the time, but
Yeah,
sometimes.
right.
Sometimes it requires being a little bit brave. So, Gwen, what have you found with your art? Because what I'm sort of getting at is sort of what doors have opened for you by being very true to yourself and true to your beliefs.
Wow. That's a big question. I can't even imagine who I would be, right, without being able to express myself. I feel so lucky that I
Yeah.
get to make my living doing this, so that I get to do it every day, because otherwise I would not be able to. I don't have, you know, massive family wealth or something that's allowing me to do this. So I feel very lucky that I get to do this every day, and I have found a way to make my living with it. I think that I I would be a very frustrated person if I couldn't do it.
Mm.
I would feel like, you know, confined. And as it is, because I am someone who is able to express themselves, through their work, and do it so regularly, I think it does make me very outspoken in a lot of ways. Um, just as something like a recent example is that my local town that I live in, the small
Mm.
town that I live in, um, there was a lot of Christianity being infused in the government here, and in the US, we do have a separation of church and state,
Yeah,
ostensibly.
yeah.
And so I pushed back against the local government, and, had some fellow residents who were interested in signing a petition, and we got a non-Christian holiday to be celebrated as well. So at least it's not just Christian holidays that are being celebrated. And I'm not sure that I would have had the courage to do all of that if I wasn't also, making art on a regular basis, and feeling, it is an exercise in bravery to put art out there.
Yes.
So then you exercise that bravery muscle, and then it becomes more possible to do other things, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, because I've always thought that there's I used to do a little video series that was about things I'd learned with my art, and how that had I guess transpired into my everyday life. It's that push pull with art, and how it does correspond to just everyday living. And Gwen, with your work, I know in the past you do commissions and your own projects.
Mm-hmm.
So is there one that you prefer, or do you like different elements of both?
I think I like different elements more at different times. There are
Yeah.
times when I want someone to tell me what it is that they love about my work, and how they want to bring it into their world, and to
Mm.
know that I'm going to be paid for it, and to know from the outset that I'm going to be paid for it. So there are times when that feels really good. It feels like I'm connected to my audience, and it feels like, um, I don't know, just like a different sort of appreciation from my audience. So there are times when commission work is definitely something that I love. And
Yeah.
then there are times when I sort of want to shut out the world for a while and just make my own work. And not that I'm not influenced by the world around me, but it's just a
Mm.
different conversation that I'm having with the audience when they're not there expecting the work. I think that commission work is a difficult sort of needle to thread for a lot of artists, and I
Mhm.
include myself in this, because um, some of us have people pleasing tendencies, and so when you bring money into that, it
Yeah.
starts to complicate things a lot. So, and even if you're not doing commission work, like if you're on social media a lot, you
Mhm.
probably are feeling pressures to people please on social media as well, just to like get those likes and things, because why else are you on there if you're not trying to get seen and engagement like that? And so I think, I think it's worth being careful with all of those, with commission work, and with um, social media, with anything that might sort of trigger people pleasing, because I do think there's a worthwhile thing about artists creating just what they want to create as well. I think it's just a balance, right? Because there's good also in being really aware of your audience and in trying to please them. Even I think there can be good things about that.
Yeah. How have you found with commissions, Gwen, like with, I guess, looking at when you have somebody you're painting something for, how do you balance the expectations they will have with your creative freedom, I guess?
I have a very comprehensive contract and agreement that is signed before I do any commission work. And that
Right.
agreement is something that I've written myself. I have it up on my site, so if people want to look at examples of it. So it's not super like full of legalese. I have had it reviewed by a lawyer friend of mine, so I feel good about it as an agreement,
Right.
legally speaking. But it's really, for me, it's more about laying out everything that I want both of us to understand before we go into this. And so, it's things like, the client is not invited to give me feedback during the process. Now, not every artist is going to make that decision, but for me, that's what works best. And so I make it clear from the beginning to my clients that they're not going to come, halfway through to my studio or get a photo halfway through and be able to say yes or no about it. They know through this contract that they're essentially hiring me as the adventure leader on the adventure of this artwork.
I really like
And
that.
I'm going to ask them all the questions at the beginning of the adventure. I'm going to try as much as I can to make an artwork that really is meaningful to them. So that means trying to get as much information from them as possible at the beginning. But after that, like, I'm the leader and you picked me for a reason. And so I'm going to take you on this adventure of this artwork. And I'm not going to say that I have 100% happiness ratings from clients. I've been doing this for 20 years. I think
Yeah,
that would
I
be
was
pretty
going to ask you
impossible.
about that, the end results. How have you found that? Yeah.
But I generally speaking, especially more recently, have clients who are just really thrilled with what I'm creating. And I think part of that, obviously it depends on the client. I'm not going to say I've obviously gotten very lucky with people, but I think part of it is that I'm communicating to people, don't just come for my style. You're coming for me as a whole person. And
Yeah.
that includes someone who wants to make an artwork that you're going to love, but also wants to make an artwork that I'm going to love. I'm not just going to be a hired hand that's fulfilling your vision. I'm going to put myself in it as well. And you should want that if you're coming to commission me. And if you don't want
Yeah.
that, you can go see someone else. That's fine.
Mm.
So I think being really good at communicating who you are as an artist and what your boundaries are, I think is valuable to not just the work you're going to be making. Like, you'll be happier with the commission work, but the clients will be too, ultimately.
Yes. Oh, Gwen, thank you so much for sharing that, because I've struggled with commissions. That turned a light bulb on for me, just the way you do that. I imagine it would feel so much more freeing to create a commission with those
It's,
parameters.
yeah, and it's not easy. Even if you're like, oh, so
Yeah.
I have an agreement, and I feel good about, like, it's still, for me, is this moment of because I do need that money. I do need to make a living, right? So
Yes.
so like, there's a scary thing. Am I going to scare someone away by being too specific about what my parameters are? Or am I, it's a scary thing. It's like,
Yes. Yes.
I don't want to diminish that at all. Cause
No,
even,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, no, what I was talking about there was the the person who's wanting the commission coming to you for you as the whole artist,
yeah,
not just fulfilling a vision that they have, because that's probably exactly what I've struggled with.
yeah, yeah.
And I liked what you said about, yeah, not having the halfway point where there's a photo, because I know in the
Mhm.
past I had one example where, yeah, there was the halfway point and it was like, oh, there's not enough, red and yellow in there. And I was kind of like, I
Mhm.
found that really disheartening.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was hard to sort of continue on and be as enthusiastic about it after that point. So Gwen, talking about your recent series of work, and you were talking about you had a colouring book, and it
Mhm.
revolves. Is this the Everything's Fine series fits in with
It
that?
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So if you can share a little bit about that with us, it
yeah.
sounds fascinating.
It's a series of paintings that I started in 2021. So after the COVID vaccines were out, so there was more like activity of people leaving their homes, like the
Yeah.
lockdowns and the confinements had sort of, petered out at that point. But I was still very nervous about it. And I was living in a place where I didn't feel like COVID was being taken very seriously. So I was having this disconnect between I wanted to be able to rejoin the world the way that other people around me were, but I was still not feeling safe. And so I was really struggling with my mental health because of that basic disconnect with the people around me. And I was not communicating well with my partner, and he basically said something needs to change. This is not working. We can't keep at this. And so I really took a moment to be like, okay, what can I do right now to shift things for us? So I started doing a lot of reading about mental health in general, and specifically things that I've never been diagnosed with, but that I know that I struggle with, like feelings of rejection, big feelings of anger, just generally like emotional dysregulation stuff where your feelings, your expression of your feelings aren't necessarily within what's considered an acceptable range. I was doing a lot of that stuff. So I started reading about all of that, and I decided what I needed was to connect with community in a way that I felt safe doing. And so I started to live stream myself as I was painting these paintings about mental health. So it was doubly vulnerable because I don't normally have people in my studio watching me paint, but here I was inviting people for at least 2 hours a week to watch me paint. And I was painting about things that were hard to deal with and hard to talk about. And so that process, I did that for 3 months at the end of 2021, helped me to really get out of the mental health rut I'd been in. It's not like it was I snapped my fingers and everything's fine now, but it did help a lot. And then the next year I ended up, it was full of upheaval in the sense that we moved, not just apartments, but also towns. So I was starting in a new place and stuff. So I kind of got off track. But so in 2022, I did some more paintings. In 2023, I did some more live streaming, and I finished up the series kind of. I mean, I still did a few after that as well. So now the series has 18 paintings in all. And last year I did a Kickstarter so that I could accept pre-orders for a coloring book version of the series, and also to make sure that I would be paid for a high school art lesson curriculum that I was going to put together and make freely available to high school art teachers, because in the US, there's a lot of trouble getting mental health information into public schools, especially because there's a lot of pushback from certain political demographics that basically, like to deny that mental health is something that anybody has to worry about.
Yeah.
And so through conversations with high school art teachers that I know, I realized I could create this lesson that is about self-portraiture, and about self-portraiture that doesn't require the student to paint or draw their own faces, but instead ask them to reveal something about their insides without showing their outsides. And so it's a way to sort of circumvent all of the political stuff around what mental health stuff is allowed, and still allow kids to learn new ways of expressing themselves and of what's going on the inside. So right now I'm working on that curriculum, that lesson, and working on putting together the coloring book of Everything's Fine. So I'm in review on the images. I have a first version of them that I showed to a group of friends and other people who are my first sort of readers for my projects. And I got some feedback back that's I don't understand this image. So obviously, there's some tweaking needing to happen. And so that's where I'm at right now with that project. And I'm pretty excited about it coming out.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds so needed, I think, with what you were talking about. Because I just know those teen years for me at school, they were really traumatic. And I think to have something like that, I even remember drawing, we had, as one of our projects, we had to do a self-portrait where we looked in the mirror and drew ourselves. And that was so confronting.
Yeah.
When at the time I had been really heavily bullied for my appearance and things like that. So actually looking at myself and seeing, I guess, what I thought was ugly and drawing that. I love what you said about, more exploring that inner world and then expressing that through art.
I'm so sorry that you went through that. And I relate a lot to what you're saying. And I also I think how lucky I am. I don't know if you necessarily feel this way, but that we didn't have, social media and cameras on us at all times where people are
Yeah.
taking selfies all the time because, I mean, I imagine that maybe selfies also make you more used to what you look like. So maybe I don't know. I feel like there could be good things and bad things about it,
Yeah.
but yeah, this focus on our exterior, I think it's something that we can all do with getting away from, and especially teens as they're trying to figure out who they are and they're getting a lot of messaging from their fellow students about conformity, because I think that teenagers are sort of viewed as these years of rebellion, but a lot of what's going on within the school system is
Mm.
about conformity, and not just from the teachers telling you how to be, but also from your fellow students, like
Yeah,
trying to sort of,
absolutely.
yeah. So I hope it'll be a good lesson.
Something like that here would be so awesome. And I say that from the perspective too, because we homeschool our kids,
Oh,
and
cool. Yeah.
just having a community where it's so diverse and we have so
Hmm.
many different people doing it for different reasons.
Hmm.
And
I was
you know,
homeschooled for part of my education too.
were
Yeah.
you? I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
how, like, looking back on that, I guess, how did you find that maybe helped you or didn't help you?
Well, I was taken out of regular schooling because I was being bullied. This was middle school,
Right.
and I didn't have like a community. There wasn't a lot of people who were doing it locally, and I just had one friend who was doing it as well. And so sometimes we would hang out because we had similar schedules, but for the most part, it was a lot of me and my parents by ourselves, and I thrived. They
Yeah.
trusted me to get my work done, and I did get my work done, and I would get it done fairly quickly. And so there was a lot of time to explore other kinds of reading and other kinds of everything. I did a lot of gardening with my dad during that time. And so I learned things that I would not have been able to if I wasn't in that kind of a situation. So it was really formative to me, and it was only a year, but it meant the
Oh,
world to me
wow.
that I
Yeah.
got to do that. And I think it also helped me realize that I am someone who thrives on my own schedule.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as an artist, it was like, oh yeah, so I've been doing this since I was 12, 13, where I decide when I'm going to get up basically, and when I'm going to do what, and it
Yeah.
works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we've found too. We're very much, because we've been doing homeschooling for a decade now, and we essentially more unschool than homeschool,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is a whole other conversation. But
True. Yeah.
we sort of we did try school in 2020, which was a really bad year to try school.
Yeah.
So we're kind of just thrown back into homeschooling because we had to,
Hmm.
but we found that structure and that very difficult after kind of having our own way of doing
Hmm.
things for so long.
Yeah.
So we were all quite happy to go back to that freedom, I guess you would say.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Gwen, talking about like going back to the social media and that what we were talking about, maybe we could sort of share a bit about your leave from social media, because I know on your website you even have down the bottom the big cross through Instagram and Facebook, which I love
Mhm.
because I've recently sort of stepped away myself. So yeah, maybe if we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so instead of having icons that say like this is how you get to my Instagram page or my Facebook or whatever, Twitter, instead I have like a crossed out version of them because I want people to click through to the page where I explain why
Yes.
I'm not on social media. Yeah, that was an evolution too, because I didn't do that to begin with. I was more low key right after I left, and then it was only, I think I'd been gone for a year or off of it for a year when I finally was like, no, I want to own this in a new
Yeah.
way. Um, yeah, my leaving was gradual.
Mm.
I took like 3 months off. I didn't know how long it would be, but then COVID started, and I felt a call to go back onto social media to provide entertainment and good art goodness to people as they
Mm.
were really struggling with COVID as COVID started. Um, and then I equally felt called to leave like 6 months later, because I realized that it had just become such a toxic atmosphere. And not even necessarily because of the people who were on it, although obviously some people were ruining it, but mostly because of the way that corporate social media is built. It's built to get into your head. It's built to leverage the way that we are such social creatures. And more than that, it's built to commodify the love that we have for each other. I mean, when people talk about why they wouldn't want to leave, oftentimes it's because they say, I wouldn't be able to stay in touch with my friends. It's not about the platform. It's not that we love Instagram. It's that we love the people on it. And at some point, I just hated hearing myself say that so much that I was like, I need to find a way to stay in touch with people that's not through that. And I knew that I would lose, certain connections with certain people. But I did, I made an effort. I don't know if you, as you left, if you said goodbye or tried to contact people, because that's a whole thing in and of itself too.
And I've really struggled with that actually, because I did to start with kind of say, I've always had a love-hate relationship with social media, and I'm, like a semi-private person. I don't love to put everything out there, but I always felt, with the marketing of your art and this supposed art business to be successful, that you have to kind of share everything, what's for breakfast, what color underwear you're wearing, this type of thing. And it just, I felt like I could never find myself there. And then when I was trying to find myself there, it just, I didn't like the judgment I received, I guess, which is, another story. But it's, at first I did announce I was leaving, and then I kind of did leave for a while, but I ended up going back because, like you said, the connections, I felt like they were the only ones I had there, and I would lose people. And then I think at the end of last year, with my mental health and, struggling with that anxiety, OCD, I did actually just go, one day I just went, no, I can't do this anymore. And I just deactivated it.
Yeah.
And I think that was last November. And I haven't been on since then. And I think I got on Facebook for like about 10 minutes a couple of weeks ago. And I went, oh, I really don't miss this. And I just, 10 minutes later deactivated it again. So that's where I'm at. I'm actually going, you know what, I think that I really like where I'm at without it. So, and I've found, in the last couple of months that I'm more myself than I've ever been. I feel like I'm excited about my art again. Everything I'm painting, I'm not kind of just posting because I have to post, because there's not that pressure there. So that's where I'm at with it.
I feel like it's hard to, I mean, as much as acrylic paints raised me as an artist, I came up with social media too. Like it was, I started my career in 2003, and by 2008, Facebook was a force already.
Yes.
And so it did shape a lot of how I understood marketing. And so to leave it was definitely a scary thing, to think like, can I actually do this without it?
I think the way you left, Gwen, was very professional. I think you gave people notice and that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Where I felt like mine wasn't quite so professional.
Hey, no, I think all ways are valid. And also like quitting looks different for different people. For some people it can be deactivating or deleting. For other people, it just means that they, don't go on there for 6 months at a time, or I can't remember the name of the, I know an artist who only gets on there for 1 month a year and promotes a particular project that they do. So I think, quitting is a very inclusive term of,
it can look many different ways.
That's right. Yeah. And I don't think there's any wrong way to take that space.
Yes, I think I more meant like people following me because they enjoyed the art. It probably would have been nicer to, I guess, have a little bit of warning or, which may come, if I do go back.
Right.
I don't know. So, how do you find then, now that you've left, Gwen, and I'm assuming you probably have no desire to go back?
Oh, no, I still do. It's weird. I mean, I've completely deleted. So there's there's nothing for me to go back to. I would have to start over. And that was purposeful, not just because I wanted to make a clear statement to those companies, not that they care, but I wanted it to be clear. But it was also like, oh no, there's nothing to go back to. You would have to start again. But I still feel the pull until social media, corporate social media, isn't such a huge force in our society. Like my town, my small town, it's one of the main ways that they get the word out about things to the community. So I'm glad that Facebook sometimes will let you actually see the page, even if you're not a member of, you don't have a profile, so that I can keep up to date with things in my town, because that's the only place I can find it. I still feel that draw, and I don't think it will go away until social media, shrinks in its importance in people's lives, if that ever happens, which I don't know that it will.
Yeah, true.
But just because I feel these pulls to it sometimes doesn't mean I actually want to be back on there. Because when I'm back on
Yes.
there, for example, looking up stuff about my local community, or I will sometimes look at the local art hashtags, my town plus the word art, just to see
Mm.
what's going on. And there's a lot of nastiness on there too, and it's just such gratuitous nastiness too. Like people just, and then I'm like, why? I don't need this in my life. This is why I
Mm.
left. Like as much as I would love to be able to be kept up to date on things, it's just not worth it for my mental health. And
Yes.
obviously, there's people who navigate that just fine, and I'm not trying to, yuck their yum. Like if they enjoy that, like
Yeah.
that's totally great. I am really happy for people who are happy on social media, but
Yeah.
for me, it just takes up way too much of my brain space,
Yeah.
and not with good things.
Yes. And that's what I found. Like for my mental health, I'm so much happier without it. And I think that that's what I had to come to myself. And I think it was artists like you, and I think you had others that you had linked to in your blog
Yes.
article that gave me the bravery to leave and to go,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can do this without social media, and I'll be a happier person because of that. Which I was going to
Yeah.
ask you, Gwen,
Yeah.
how do you find promoting your art without social media?
Oh, it is a whole thing for sure.
Mm,
But when you think about it, promoting your art on social media is also a lot of work. There's
yes.
a repetitive nature to it where you know what you have to do. You have to format the image in a certain way. You have to write the caption, and whatever the particulars of the particular platform is. It feels easier to do because it is a repetitive thing that you're doing, even though they sometimes change, what they feature or whatever. But I think there's an ease in that sense to it that makes people forget that it's a lot of work to promote on social media as well. When you're promoting off of social media, you have to be a little more inventive. You don't necessarily get to repeat the same, action every time you want to promote. And I think that's where it becomes intimidating, or part of maybe what becomes intimidating about it. But it involves. I have alerts out for my town's name plus art, or the local anywhere in the area, so that I can find out about people in the area who write about art. I
Mm,
get a Google alert when someone's written about something in the area, so then I know who to contact, like which writers are the ones that I should be looking at to write
yeah.
about my work. Um, I find ways to get my work out there that have nothing to do with press as well, that just have to do with being in more group shows. I didn't do as many of them before I um, got off of social media, just because I didn't feel drawn to that. But
Mm,
now that I'm off of social media, I realize, oh no, group shows are a really great way to get someone else's promotional machine working for me.
yes.
um, so you adjust, you find
Yeah.
new ways of doing it. It takes a little more thinking. It's like I compare it to like when we went vegetarian or vegan. When we first did it as a household, I was like, there's cooking is so hard now. Like, what do I do? But then 6 months later, you have your new recipes and your new habits, and so you can go to the grocery store and you don't have to like think so hard about what to buy because you have your new habit. But right at
Yeah.
that beginning transition, it just feels really overwhelming until you
Mm.
find your new recipes.
Yes, I like that. And it moves from that awkward into sort of more doable.
Yeah, yeah.
So have you found in, doing things a different way without social media, do you think you've had opportunities that have arisen because you haven't been on social media?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I just had a huge opportunity that really stemmed from not being on social media. When I first moved to this town where I live, um, it was the first time I'd moved somewhere as an adult without social media. And I was like, how do you make friends without Facebook in a new town? Because people like to use social media to sort of look stuff up about you. And if they don't
Yes.
see you in the threads, they're like, who is this new person? And so I decided to make a whole series of portraits of people I was meeting and who were not scared of me, even though I wasn't on social media. And I called the series Friend Request. And it
Yeah.
was like an analog sort of my own Facebook, right? An analog
Mm, mm.
Facebook where I was spending hours with these people, just hanging out with them, but also photographing them so that I could then paint them. And they're spending hours painting them. And, it's not
Mm.
exactly like the click of a button to friend someone when
Yeah,
you're not on
yeah.
social media. But so that exhibit of almost 50 paintings was sending out press releases about it, and I got in touch with someone for the large regional paper of New Jersey who makes videos, and he likes to make videos about artists, and he is fascinated by the idea of being off of social media because he, except for his professional life, would rather not be on it. And so
Yeah.
he took an interest in the story, so he did a video about that show, and then he and I have kept in touch, and he recently came and did another video about another project that I was working on. So that comes from being off of social
Yes.
media. I wouldn't have, had that opportunity. So obviously that's a big example, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of smaller things. I
That's so
really think
cool.
that,
I love that, Gwen, and
yeah,
I particularly what you said about your series, and that getting to know people and then painting them, because that's a very personal experience too. I've found, like, between artists and the person you paint. I
yeah,
love that
yeah.
sort of interaction. So I imagine that would have been quite powerful.
It brought me back to that place of making friends is hard. I think the word friend has been sort of, I don't know, it's been changed. I was going to say corrupted,
Yes.
but that's not fair. It's been changed by social media into being less meaningful, I think, than it
Well, I
used
think
to
too,
be.
when you can unfriend someone with the click of a button,
Right,
and then the ramifications of that on somebody's mental health if they have
right,
issues, that I've
right.
really struggled with that myself.
It's true. It's really true. Yeah, it was a good project all around for me. It was also a very learning thing because not everybody I painted totally loved the painting that I made, and
Right.
so for some of those, we moved past it and we still hang out, and it wasn't necessarily like an overt like I hate it. It was like, oh, I want to buy the painting because I also painted some people's pets because I had met their pets a bunch and I thought that was fun
Right.
too because dogs and cats can make you feel welcome too. So
Yes, yes.
so some of them were like, I want to buy, the portrait of my dog, but I don't really want to buy the portrait of me. And so
Right.
obviously they're not necessarily saying that they hate the portrait of them, but they're just saying that that's not something that they want in their house. So, but
Yes.
for the most part, we've moved beyond, but not everyone. And so that was also a learning thing. Like, oh yeah, painting people's portraits is a powerful act, and I shouldn't
Yes.
forget how how
It can be
confronting it can be.
confronting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, because, and I know sometimes I've given portraits as gifts, and maybe because it's a gift too, it's like the way it's received is a little bit, the word probably is confronting. The person is,
Yeah,
why would I
yeah,
want that on a picture of me on the wall? If it brings up
right.
emotions about themselves. Yeah.
I love portraits of me. There's one that was painted of me years ago, like 2009, I guess is probably when it was done. I was working on a collaboration with another artist, and we painted ourselves and then
Mm.
each other, and then also like our partners and our parents and her kid and my brother. And the idea was to show, like a painting of my partner once by me, who obviously I know him really well, and then once by her, who she barely knew him at all at the time. So to see how is it different, a portrait different based on how well you know the subject. And so that was the concept of the series. But
Yeah.
I got my painting done by a professional and someone whose work I admire,
Mm.
and I just was giddy with the painting. Like,
Wow.
I love it. I own it. We
Yeah.
traded paintings at some point, and so we each have some of each other's paintings. And I just think it's the coolest thing ever. I don't actually think that the face looks very much like my face. It doesn't,
Mm.
like, not that I'm saying that it's wrong. It's more like I don't see myself that way. But the way
Yes.
she captured my body, my movement of who I am, like in
Mm.
that sort of like more corporeal sense, I was like, that's amazing. I'd never felt so seen as
Wow.
that part of that portrait. And yeah, it's a fascinating but also confronting thing to have
Yes.
your portrait done for sure.
Yes, I love that, and I would agree. I think that, yeah, when I've had my portrait done, and that it's, there is that sort of expectation of how you think it will turn out as to
Right.
what actually does turn out. Yeah,
Like, oh,
that
that's
can.
what you see in me. Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, which is really cool, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's from the perspective of an artist. I can understand people who aren't artists. It's probably different again.
I mean, I think I aspire. I think sort of the highest level of mental health is being someone who loves completely whatever someone says is a portrait. Like I've had people I've painted who have just totally embraced my painting of them. And, through whatever feelings they have about what it actually looks like, they still just love the crap out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that shows a real understanding and ability to separate yourself from, like, to not be so attached to that outcome of, like, does the painting look like what I think I look like? And
Yeah.
so I aspire to one day have my portrait done and just be able to love it completely as an expression of someone else, and as their expression. Yes, it does relate to me, but it's not something that I need to feel like I should control, because I think on some level, when people don't love the portrait of themselves, there's a control element there. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a
yeah.
lovely way of looking at it too. And, because portrait art, we both like it varies so widely, and it's
Hmm.
very much up to the, artist and how they see things, their style. So many different things go into it. I know I used to watch a series on, I think it was the UK Portrait Artist of the Year, and I'd always just love to watch that just to see how so many different artists saw the one sitter and the
Oh yeah, I've heard
yeah.
of that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fascinating
Cool.
show to watch just for that element, a different like, the artist's interpretation of that one person, whether it be an actor, it
Mhm.
was usually somebody known, and how they interpreted it. Yeah, it was quite.
I would love to be the one who gets painted by everybody. I think that is such a
Yeah, oh,
fascinating
that would be
experience.
awesome, wouldn't it? Yeah, seeing you in all those different ways.
Yeah.
So, Gwen, coming on to talking about the business side of art, how do you find in your own sort of schedule with creating? How do you balance, I guess, marketing with creating?
I think there's a lot of chats with myself where I'm like, no, this has to get done. Like,
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
to do this marketing. Obviously, there's parts of my marketing, maybe not obviously, but if you've been to my site, you can probably tell that there's parts of my marketing that I like. I love keeping a blog. I enjoy being able to share about my work in the format that I've created on my blog.
Mm.
But there are certain aspects of the business of art that I don't love as much. And so sometimes I will take work days, what I call work days.
Yeah, yeah.
It's usually a Monday, and it's like, okay, you have these 3 administrative tasks that you've been putting off for weeks now. Just get them done, and then you're allowed to paint. You're not allowed to paint until you do this. So that's one
Yeah,
of my methods, is like keeping the painting away from me until I can take care of certain things.
yeah.
But I think there's also a lot of, I mean, I think most artists have experienced this as if they've been showing their work. There are times when you don't have to be as much about the marketing, right? When you don't have a show up, or when you don't have a particular project that's happening like really out there right now, you can take time sort of away from the public and from thinking about your art in that public sense. And so to really appreciate those times when I don't have a show up right now, so I can dedicate most of my time to making the work. But when a show is up, to just go hard at it, to just like barely be painting at all. There will be months where I don't, well, usually like no more than a month at a time, where I don't get to paint at all because I know I have a show up for this month and I need to really promote. I need to be looking for press. I need to be, whatever, however it is, I need to be sending out emails to everyone who's in the area who might not have seen the work yet, making
Mm.
sure that I'm, I have clients, people who've supported my work for years, who are on my mailing list, and yet if I do not text them specifically about a show, they're not likely to show up because they don't. I think in part because they don't feel as special that way, because they're on my mailing list instead of,
Right.
so taking that time to make sure that I text those people who I know prefer to be texted. It can feel like a lot, and it is a lot, but it's
Mm.
worthwhile, I think, usually,
Yes.
to invite those people who do support your work to, be involved in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. As an artist, you seem to be, like, I guess, very active and vibrant with your work, and even with your connections with the people who love and support your work. I guess, how have you built that relationship, and how do you find that that works best for you and them?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I do, a lot of the times I really enjoy it. And especially, right now I'm talking with you and sharing about my work and really enjoying, doing just that.
Yeah.
Um, but I also want to give a nod to the me who's like, if I didn't have to make a living, I probably wouldn't talk to anybody. Like, if I am
Hey,
being
yeah.
very clear about who I am in a vacuum, I guess you can't ever really be in a vacuum, but if I could,
Mhm.
I I'm definitely an introvert, and I definitely need my space to feel centered. And sometimes, because of the way that I've chosen to make my life and to make my living, I do get frustrated and I do feel overexposed a lot. That is a specific term that I would use, overexposed,
Yeah.
because as an introvert, I would be spending so much more time keeping to myself, not sharing even as much as I do share on my blog about the making of my work and the thoughts behind it. So there are times when I am frustrated with this aspect of my work, and I don't want to like downplay that, because I think it's important to put that out there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do also enjoy the conversations that come from putting my work out there.
Yeah.
So there are times when I get tired of it, but I have to remember that even besides being able to make a living, which is obviously important, there's also, I do like that feeling of changing someone's world, even if it's just a tiny little bit with an artwork of mine that they've seen, and it just shifts their perspective slightly and gives them a better feeling for the day. Like, those small things matter to me enough to go outside of who maybe I am in that vacuum, and to push myself to be more social. But I also do need to take a lot of time to myself, and that it's very clear when I haven't been doing it enough. And so I will just sort of block off days where I'm like, I'm not going to talk to anybody except my partner. That's it. Like I have been overexposed. I need to now hide for a while.
Yeah, I love that way of looking at it, Gwen, because I can completely identify. And I think that's probably what I have struggled with. And I know other artists have too, is that if you identify as being an introvert, that, there's that kind of hermit side of yourself that you also, I've nearly felt guilty for at times, because I've also struggled with friendships and that. And there's just that sort of, I guess, outlook where, women need to connect because that helps with your dopamine and it'll mean you'll live longer. So I'm like, okay, if I'm not an out there person, does that mean I'll have like, a reduced lifespan or something unhealthy? So yeah, balancing those sides of yourself, but also, as you say, there's that beautiful side of art and how it connects people with business and that creative side. That's what I've struggled with. So it's nice to hear your perspective on that, I guess, and nearly to feel that it's okay to have that side of you where you want to shut yourself away and just do what you need to do.
People say that it's hard to make a living as an artist, referring to the creativity, to the pressures of, finding your audience, the people who will support your work and all of that. But the emotional side of being an artist, like, it cannot be underscored enough, just how complex that part is. I think even if artists are more social or more extroverted, there must be a struggle at some point because of the way that we rip out parts of our heart and put them out to the world.
Yes.
That I don't know if I've ever met a creative person who hasn't at some point struggled with that difficulty, the emotional difficulty of being a creative person who wants to share their work with others.
It can be torture at times.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it feels, and finding, I guess, the journey through that. And I love how your art ties in so closely to your journey as a person. And I was just on your website the other day looking at, I think it was called Off, with the light switch and the volcano.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that so much. And the way that you have used questions down underneath the artwork to sort of, I guess, nearly invite people in or invite further exploration of themselves in the work.
Yeah, it's a method called dialoguing with the image, and if you just look that up, I can't remember the name of the art therapist who came up with it, but the concept is that you are allowing the audience to engage with your work and just with the work, and not think about you as much as just think about how they are seeing that image, and you're inviting them to delve into it with these questions. And it was something that I learned from getting feedback from therapists about this mental health work. And in fact, the therapist, the psychologist, she's a research psychologist actually, who taught me about this, whose name is Nisha Gupta, she will be writing the foreword for my coloring book. So my coloring book is
Oh,
meant
that's
for
awesome.
teens or grown-up teens, everybody, any, adults, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's also does have a foundation in, um, known therapeutic concepts and methods. And it's also a workbook because there will be writing spaces in the book so that people can write about their ideas that come out of those questions, as well as coloring in the image, because I think
Yeah.
it's so helpful to do that.
So I'd love to do your coloring book, Gwen.
Oh, good,
so,
good.
so will it come out hard copy, or how will the
Yeah.
distribution of it work?
At this point, I've had some interest from a publishing group, but I don't know that it will go.
Mm,
I have told my Kickstarters, so it's always up in the air. It will definitely be published, even if it is self-published, and it will be published as an object that you can hold and color in,
yeah.
but also as a PDF that you can download and print out. And it will be out by June, hopefully before
Yeah.
that. Obviously before that, I guess, in the sense that
Mm.
whatever. I'm thinking that's how it's going to work, but I've promised my Kickstarter supporters it will be June. So
And do you have an age group that you're sort of aiming it at?
yeah, so Dr.
So it is.
Nisha Gupta, who's the one who's writing the forward for it, she said, "So who am I writing to? With this
Mm,
forward?" And I said, "You're writing to adolescents and to those of us who never really grew up and are very much in touch with the teenage
yeah.
and the angst that lives in us still." And she said, "Perfect. I totally understand that audience."
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Can identify with that because we sort of, um, I know that I had my daughter as well. She has like ADHD, and
Mhm.
I think she would love something like that too because I know she expresses herself with drawing, and she naturally goes to that. So
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah. So Gwen, do you have sort of any future pursuits or where you want to head with your art?
Yeah, so this year in the US is a difficult one in terms of it's a presidential election year and there's some nasty political stuff happening. And so
Mm,
I had decided early on last year that this year I wanted to take on a project of um, illustrating Tim Snyder's On Tyranny. It's a book about how to keep your center when scary things are happening politically.
yeah.
And it's 20 lessons of how to deal with that. Um, so my plan is to illustrate some of his lessons and also draw from other books, people who are talking about how to navigate a world where the political and the power structures are getting scarier and scarier. So I don't know that I'm going to publish that work this year.
Mm, mm.
I just know that I'm going to channel some of the angst that I'm feeling about the situation into making that work this year.
Yeah, awesome. And I imagine that I know with me with art, it's often a release. It's like a way of dealing with things. Do you find that also?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that strongly comes through in your work and what you do and sort of what's going on in your world at the time.
Thank you. I hope it's valuable to others as well, because it's definitely very valuable to me. I definitely do need, in order to be able to think, I feel like I need to make art.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know, much about, I guess, to comment on the political sort of
Hmm.
what goes on in the US, but I can only imagine that it's very intertwined with everyday life and kind of the information that's being put to everyone, especially what you were saying
Hmm.
about the school curriculums and things like that, and not even having a all the holidays being Christian and not having a balance
Right.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's sort of interwoven, isn't it? And so it's sort of nice to sort of tease that apart sometimes. And do you have any advice, Gwen, for I guess living a fulfilling life, or a life as a full time artist for others considering it?
Hmm. I think I think my main advice right now would be to make work for yourself first. I think while it's lovely to think about an audience, and I think that there's great things when you think about an audience. I think that centering on yourself first is a useful way of making work that will matter to others as well. I think that there's maybe a message that if you are too self-centered or too self-indulgent, there's those kinds of messaging that's not going to be useful.
Yes.
But I think our society, just very generally, with the internet and corporate social medias, and has made us very outwardly focused on what is going to get the likes and what is going to get the that kind of appreciation. And what we need now is artists who are really good at bringing out their internal landscape and not being as concerned about what's going to sell or what's going to be popular and that sort of a thing.
Yeah. Do you ever find too that as you do that, like you express yourself through your work, that others can connect with that because you've just been very authentic in what you've done and how you've,
Yeah.
I guess, said it?
Yeah, I think that's true for my work, and that's true for the work that I enjoy. Other artists' work is the stuff that is more vulnerable, is more true, less concerned about what's going to hit right with
Yes.
a wider audience. Yeah.
Yes, or not, like not doing something because you're afraid of how it will come across. Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Gwen. It's been wonderful to chat, and I've really enjoyed, I guess, getting to know you and your story and your art better.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Trailblazers Palette podcast. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you enjoyed the episode. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with incredible guests. Keep blazing your trail, and until next time, stay inspired. This is Sancha, your host, signing off. See you soon, Trailblazers.